Because if you micromanage them, you've already failed. I got very, very intentional about finding the people inside that really had a passion and a drive to put their all in. What I'm looking for is, let me understand this person as an individual and understand like what do they stand for, what are they passionate about, right? Like understanding their personality and are they going to put their all in. And so I try to find that, and I feel like once you find those type of people that are really going to align with the people you want in your organization, it's a lot easier to be a leader to them as well. You're not going to try to micromanage them, because if you micromanage them, you've already failed. If you're micromanaging someone, it's usually something that you're doing wrong as a leader, and also possibly that person might be the wrong fit. And that means you need to be uplifting people and helping people grow as an individual themselves.
Welcome to Builders, the podcast for impact-driven leaders who are done carrying it all and ready to scale with clarity, strategy, and freedom. I'm your host, Alex Snyder, strategic growth architect, creator of the CEO Recode, and second brain to leaders who are building brilliant companies without sacrificing every ounce of their time, energy, or sanity. Each episode, I sit down with bold leaders who've rebuilt, recalibrated, or redefined what it means to lead well and live well on their own terms. We talk messy pivots, leadership upgrades, tactical wins, and the deep personal work it takes to build a business that actually works for you. If you love the episode, make sure you follow, rate, and share it with another leader who's building big and wants to build smarter. And if you're listening and thinking, damn, I need someone in the guts of my business with me, let's talk. Book your free business breakdown call using the link in the show notes. In 30 minutes, I'll help you pinpoint where blockers in your time, team, or strategy are silently stalling your growth, and define 2 to 3 high-impact shifts you can implement now to regain traction and build momentum. Now, let's dive in. Let's build it better. Adam, welcome to Builders. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Yeah, no, Alex. I mean, we always have great conversations, so I'm excited to go deeper and to have an awesome episode here.
Amazing. I am so excited for our listeners to get into this episode. You are, in my opinion, the definition of a serial entrepreneur, a true global connector for founders, investors, and really unique opportunities. I've had the privilege, just in the time that we've known each other, to see you design and lead at least half a dozen different business models, which is so impressive and unique. As always, I'm not going to even try to do justice to your introduction, so I will ask you in your own words, who are you and what are you building?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I just love business, right? It's my favorite hobby. I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always known I would be an entrepreneur. I lived in Asia for a few years, ended up learning Mandarin, Chinese fluently, and then got really deep into supply chain. Ended up building an 8-figure business, which I've exited out of. And I really understood the value of relationships, right? And that really took me to where I'm at with founders and funders, where, we're building a massive community of VCs and founders, and I'm just absolutely loving it. But most importantly, I'm a husband and soon to be father in February, and I'm a very passionate person, and I love life.
I love that. Of course, congratulations.
Thank you.
Shift. You mentioned, you built an 8-figure company and exited. You didn't mention that you built that, if I'm not mistaken, in your 20s while you were still in school. Nobody in your family was an entrepreneur. So how did you know that you were meant to build businesses?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I just always loved talking to people. Like even when I was 12 years old, like some of my best friends or good friends or whatever were in their 40s, 50s. I just really, really wanted that mentor in my life and talking with people. Honestly, I was always the person that was mowing lawns and everything like everybody else. And then when I was about 11 or 12, I was a paintball ref, and I realized I was getting paid $5 an hour. And I figured out what his cost of goods were. I figured out like how much money was he making, etc. And I said, okay, hey, don't pay me anything hourly. Just bring any person I bring, I make $10 a person. So I got somebody else. I said, hey, bring 10 people and I'll pay for your paintball, because it was $30. And then I realized I was making more money than him. He actually got mad at me because I was able to kind of structure the business. And I was like, okay, this is the way to make money, right? And then from there, always, I worked at a golf course growing up just because I wanted to get in the room with people, and I'd go golfing with a new business owner. And I just absolutely loved building those relationships and figuring out ways to hustle. And, I helped build a clothing company, which we had like Justin Bieber, James Harden, Chance the Rapper wearing. And I just loved it. I just absolutely loved it. And I always knew that I would be able to build a life that I was able to provide for my family. And I never believed there was any limit in goals and dreams. So yeah.
I love that. I love that it sounds like you kind of like loved learning the system and then learning how to game it in, a good way, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Do you think that that came from any particular experiences, or do you see the world in a systems kind of way?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've thought about this a lot, and it seems like I'm not trying to manipulate anyone, but I almost see it as a chessboard when I'm thinking of like my goals and dreams. I'm like, okay, what is my checkmate? What are my goal that I want to get to? And what are the pieces that I have to naturally move? And so with people, it's like, okay, I want to meet this person. I'll figure out how to get a hold of that person, right? And I think that's because I don't believe in any limits. Like I believe like if I have a goal that I want to set or a person I want to meet, no matter how big or famous they are, like I know that I can add value to them, right? And I can figure out a way to add value. And so, yeah, I think honestly it was a gift that I was really just, I think, born with. I just loved, and I just really always loved people and getting to know them and understanding. And I think when you are able to genuinely get to know somebody and have a desire to add value, there will be ways that you find synergy to receive value.
I love that. In Mexico, we say todo se puede, like everything's possible.
Totally.
I really hear from you what I would call in a more formal way, like an inner locus of control, like just that belief that like you make things happen. And also kind of, I think that element is like, I can add value. It's like, well, if I don't already have a way to be valuable, I'll learn something that is then valuable, right? Like there's just that like
Totally.
curiosity. And I liked what you said because I've actually had this conversation with a lot of my other friends who are very successful entrepreneurs who have often moved between, roles or industries in ways that might not be so obvious. And that was actually why I asked you for the question too. Do you see in systems? Because I often think I see the world in levers, and I know I've struggled with feeling like I could manipulate things, and I have this like, oh my god, I don't want to do that. Like, and so that's where these late night long conversations with these other entrepreneurs of how do you handle like with maybe it's great power comes great responsibility, but I love the way you talked about it as a chessboard and a just confidence in the ability to deliver value in order to connect to the person that could unlock value for you. I think that's a very nice way to see it. And I know you, so I know it's a very genuine.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think with that too, like what people talk about the successes or whatever, but it's like also there's a lot of rejection that I had to go through as well, right? There's a lot of times where I was like, okay, I really want to get this thing done and I don't hit that goal. And I think that's the key is just, as they say, you never fail if you don't give up, right? And so figuring out how to have that confidence, and when you doubt, I really love it saying it's and doubt your doubts before you doubt yourself or doubt what you're working on. And I think that's so important to remember as you go through that journey.
I love that. I'm wondering about what we just talked about, right? Building an 8-figure business in your 20s. That's a headline,
Hmm.
right? That's a great headline. And what do people not see when they hear that headline?
Yeah, totally. I mean, building an 8-figure, people are like, "Oh my gosh," like, because they see all these things online where people are sitting on a beach and they're like, "Oh, I've made this much money," or whatever. Like, it's a grind. Like, I mean, maybe people are luckier than I am. I feel like I'm a pretty lucky person in general, but it's, before that, I was there was no balance in life, right? Like I was truly working 100 plus hours. I was in school. I was finishing my business degree at BYU for global supply chain. I would, in between classes, I was on calls. I would fly out to New York. I would fly back. There was no balance in any way, shape, or form. Luckily, I have a little bit more harmony now. But yeah, I mean, I learned so much. I also learned so much of the behind scenes of understanding your financials even deeper than I ever have before, understanding who you partner with, right? Understanding where you put your time. Like I truly put a lot of time into people that drain me, like drain my energy. And looking back, should I have done that differently? Yeah, there's a lot of things I would have done differently. But yeah, I just continued to push forward, right? I believe in visibility, and so I got really really deep with my manufacturers in China, and I was on with them till 2 3 a.m. all the time, and then I got really deep into I started out truly just calling like army bases and air force bases and calling them to try to get government contracts, and then I learned deeper about SBA.gov and learned about Procurement Technical Assistance Center. And then from there, I went from government contracts to now commercialization of selling to hospitals, selling to pharmacies, selling into some of the other big groups. And so, yeah, it was just continuing to pivot and continuing to just keep grinding, right?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting as well. People, again, headlines, we hear headlines about, tech, we hear headlines about, innovation, but so many people make their fortunes in unsexy business. And when you said supply chain, I was like, oh, right. That's what you're just incredible at. And it's not something that I don't think anybody growing up is like, I want to be a supply chain expert when I grow up. But how did you kind of get into that and then turn that into or realize that that was your way into a truly scalable business?
Yeah. I've always loved international. Like I really, really love cultures. Like one of my favorite things in this world is breaking bread with somebody from a different culture and like truly getting to know them. And I think I was like that even growing up. And then when I lived in Taiwan and I lived in Asia for several years, I was able to like really immerse myself into the culture, really immerse myself into my relationships. And even before that, I was studying international business. I actually started college when I was 16, just because I wanted to do some opportunities during that time. So I already knew I wanted to go in international business. And then once I got back, again, it was just building my relationships again, right? Figuring out who do I need to go deep with, who do I need to understand. And during COVID, I saw this massive opportunity where there was a ton of shortages. No one could get product. Even before like really 2020 hit, there was already those issues. And so, yeah, I just went really, really deep into that supply chain. And, school, did that help me? Sure. Honestly, if it wasn't for my wife, I probably would have dropped out of school. But it allowed me to have like real world relationships and real world opportunities. And yeah, I just always loved international business. And so just keep going deeper and deeper into the culture and deeper into the opportunities there are.
I'm also, I think we have that in common. I really credit travel and different cultures with so many of my ideas, so many of my outlooks on the world, even so much as I think there's an expectation or, probably a fair bit of proven data that a lot of people get more closed-minded and more stuck in our habits as we get older. And I feel like I've gone the opposite direction. I've gotten a lot more open-minded. And I credit that to travel and cultures and choices that have exposed me to more people. I'm wondering, I think in this day and age, it's very hard to build anything sizable without being able to handle different cultures.
Yeah.
What were the experiences that really shaped your understanding of like how to navigate what's most important as you move beyond your kind of homogenous core community?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I just think truly as you understand new cultures, I mean, we've talked a lot about this. And as you understand new cultures, you find out like we're all human, right? Yes, we all have our own cultures. Yes, there's so difference versus somebody born and raised in America versus born and raised in China. And there's differences that, maybe are hard to understand and maybe are easy to understand. But bottom line is we're all human. We're all, I believe, trying to do our best. And we're all trying to be good people. And we all want to be, all want to feel important, right? And I also think too, and in business school, they always talk about like, oh, China is so much more longer term looking and America is not as longer term looking. But I think bottom line is I don't care where you live, relationships are everything. And so if you can build a trust and build a relationship, and I think the only thing that truly builds that is authenticity and just really getting to know that person and listening too, like understanding what is important to them, you'll find ways to connect with them, build a relationship with them. And I think that's the foundation of building a long-term relationship. Like with my business, I would have not been able to be successful if I didn't have deep relationships with that supplier, right? Like that was so key. And that was because I connected with them and I built deep relationships and I figured out trust. And you do that through the relationship, but also you do that through action and continuing to be consistent of what you built from that foundation.
Yeah. You hit on, people want to kind of feel important or feel meaningful. And I think what that made me think was I really believe curiosity is one of the precursors to doing kind of anything at a extraordinary level, including building businesses. And there's a lot of authors that speak about this in Stephen Kotler's books and things like that around flow and peak performance. And it sounds like you have just applied that to people, right? Like, and if I think about the experiences I've had around the world in kind of cross-cultural management and working with teams and working and building relationships, but also just with people, there's an amazing amount of things we can get to without a lot of shared language, without a lot of ability. I've had some pretty profound experiences connecting with somebody in an environment where we really couldn't communicate in the way we typically would, but we were able to do that. I'm wondering how curiosity has kind of played into your journey, or if you have a view on a different maybe characteristic that's really required.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree that curiosity is truly like it drives you to learn new things, bottom line, right? Like, and I am always so curious. Like, I love meeting new people and just understanding. Like, let me go deep. Let me understand all of the journey you've gone through, like your life that you've gone through. My wife and I lived in Europe for a few months, and one of my favorite experiences that we had was we went to do some service, and we went and worked with some nuns. And I didn't speak any Italian, honestly. I have a really hard time with Italian, but we had a translator there, and I was able to just understand her life. And it was like one of the most profound and like amazing experiences in my life. And I think that's what's so cool is I was just curious about her life, and people will share and understand. And I mean, it's the same thing with business. It's how I learned. I mean, again, I don't believe anyone ever masters Chinese, but it's how I was able to learn Chinese was I was just curious. I didn't learn from a book. A lot of people study flashcards. I just went out and just spoke with the locals, lived with the locals, figured out ways to continue to learn because I was curious about it, right? And I'm still learning every single day. And I think the most successful people in life are the ones that never stop learning. I mean, go look at, Charlie Munger or Warren Buffett. I mean, it's so incredible how much learning and curiosity has been a part of their success.
Would you qualify yourself as an extrovert?
100%. Yeah. I'm a major extrovert. Yeah.
Come across people that are maybe more naturally introverted, that you've seen be able to replicate a similar approach to relationship building at scale the way that you've done it?
You're saying people that are introverted are able to do a very similar structure of how I build
Yeah,
relationships?
or even, I mean, the answer might be no, and this is what I've observed. I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I'm listening to you, and even though I think we share some of the same values like around this, I also know like my bandwidth for that is less than average.
Mm, yeah. I think it's so interesting. I would love to I think we could talk for like 3 hours just about extrovert versus introvert because I don't know, it's so confusing. Like my wife is introvert, but she's like an extroverted introvert. And I feel like there's a lot of people I meet that I'm like, when they tell me they're introverted, I'm like, are you sure? Like, are you understand that? Yeah, totally, totally. I mean, I think what's interesting about introvert and extrovert too is like I'm an extrovert and I'm okay to go to events and all this stuff, and I do a lot of events, but I love I would choose one-on-one conversations or even a small group, but honestly one-on-one over a big group any day. And so some people say that's more introvert, but I guess the answer to your question is, yeah, I've met a lot of people that are introvert that are incredible at building relationships, incredible at, understanding and being curious. And yeah, I don't know. It's, introvert and extrovert are very interesting topics specifically when it comes to really understanding like how does people strategically structure their lives or their relationships if they're introvert versus extrovert. And I think it's again finding what works best for you and what do you enjoy as well, and putting yourself in the scenarios that you enjoy instead of going to a bunch of events. Like, make sure you're intentional about setting up coffee and building relationships with people. I think that's an interesting thing too, is like there's a balance of like continuing to grow your network and meeting more people. And there's also a balance of like go really deep into those relationships. Don't have them be surface level, right? So
Again, that long term as well, right? Like, yeah, you
yeah.
can have 10,000 connections, but like, do you know any of them at a level of
Hmm.
depth? Do they know you? Right? I think that's one of the things, technology is this incredible tool for volume, but it doesn't necessarily support. And this is actually an interesting conversation I've had around AI with a lot of people, is like the swing back towards humanity, relationship building, even in person, how
Totally.
important that's becoming. Actually, probably a perfect question for, founders and funders, like why this business?
Yeah.
Like, how did you start it? What, why does it matter to you?
Totally. Yeah. So Founders and Funders, it started 6 years ago with Jeff Erickson. He was with a tiny company out of San Francisco called eShares, which now is called Carta, which is one of the largest platforms for funds and VCs and fund management. Anyways, and so he was really, the face. He was over their partnerships, growing their partnerships, doing events. And then it's morphed into something so much more. We've really restructured the company and made it, instead of kind of a side hustle, into like a really scalable business. And that was, when I went from exiting my 8-figure business and also figuring out like what are my main focuses going to be. I went through this time where like during COVID, Zoom is an incredible tool and WhatsApp is an incredible tool. But like you said, there's nothing that replaces in-person relationships, right? And so I actually split from my business partner and in March this year, and my wife and I, we just went on this journey of going wherever the business needed us to go and being in person with people. So went to Dubai, we went to Miami, Washington, Utah, New York City. We were going to go to Asia for a few months. We didn't end up doing that, but it kind of went on this journey of like, I want to be in person. I want to build relationships and I want to figure out like, what is my next focus? What is the next part of my journey? And so I went to this event called Founders and Funders. I was really going there to build a deeper relationship with Jeff. And I just fell in love with it. It was like one of the best networking events I've ever been to. I met some amazing people and I was like, how do I be a part of this? And so we figured out, and they were kind of looking for the same thing. And anyways, since then we've like really taken the business to the next level. We've probably 10x it probably in 2026. We've brought on team members. We've restructured. So I've come on as co-founder and CEO, and we're taking it to the next level. And I believe that in-person events are going to be are going to just going to explode over the next few years. And I think a lot of companies are realizing how important community is. And so we're right at that forefront of it, of building that community, helping enterprise level companies do that, and also VCs as well.
That I think the understanding of that importance and then the execution of it are two very, very different like steps. And
Totally.
so tell like let's I'd love to dig in a little bit more, like what is Founders and
100%.
Funders? do? Like, what's the mission? What's
Yeah.
the, tangible way that you guys are delivering on that mission?
Yeah, totally. No, so our mission is, I mean, it really roots into Jeff Erickson, who founded Founders and Funders. I mean, I'll have to introduce you to Jeff, actually. You would absolutely love him. Like some of the best people in the world, Jeff and Inger. Um, the whole goal is to add value to founders, right? Jeff is, Inger is another co-founder and CMO. She built a business that was, 500 Inc., one of the fastest growing companies, built it to 40 million, exited. So she's very entrepreneurial. She's gone into companies, restructured their affiliate program, and has driven over, I don't know, 400 million plus in revenue. And so I'm working with two amazing people, and our whole goal is how do we add value to the founders, right? How do we add value to our partners as well? Um, Jeff and Inger have angel invested in about 65 plus companies. Anyone that's starting a company or raising money, they want to get on with Jeff. And that's because we know how to add value to them. Like we know the steps they're running into, and there's a lot of people, and this goes deeper into it. There's a lot of companies that should never raise money from VCs. There's also a lot of companies that are not ready to raise money from VCs. And so our whole goal is how do we help those founders be ready to raise money for VCs, and then also help them raise money for VCs. We have a massive community of VCs. I meet with VCs every single day. I'm learning deeper into it. And we meet with founders every single day, and we do 2 events a month where we're meeting with 800 plus founders, and then even outside of that we're meeting with them. And so we're really trying to build a community that we can be in that intersection of helping founders be ready to talk to VCs, and then also connecting VCs. And then we drive immense value for our enterprise level companies as well. We will actually be launching our own fund, our Founders and Funders Fund, FNF Fund, in 2026, because we have a ton of deal flow, and I've invested in companies, Jeff has invested in companies, and we want to do that at a bigger scale and continue to. There's an interesting intersection and shift happening in VC where it's almost like a private equity feel. I used to do a lot of private equity consulting. We'd go into companies that were purchased by a TPG and restructure their systems and processes. I used to believe, I was like, oh, I want to build a private equity company. And then as I've gotten into this whole VC world, I actually find VC really, really fascinating. And what I used to think VC was just money. Now what's happening in VC, you have to do so much more than money. Like you need to be driving revenue for them, creating connections, like really being a value add to that company, which I absolutely love. And so I think we'll see that more and more with VC firms, where they're going to continue to find ways where instead of just giving someone a check, they're going to give them a check, mentorship, driving revenue, relationships, like all of the above, which is kind of a private equity VC structure that's shifting even more so. It was happening in the past, but it's becoming more and more of the norm.
I love that trend. I call it strategic money because I'm just like, early stage, you don't just need money. You need strategic partners who can also give you the money to execute. But it's something that I've watched evolve to a degree, but have always known that what I wanted to do was to be able to bring skills, like, strategic skills and funds into companies. And I think
100%.
I've always had this like vision for that. And I remember when I left strategy consulting and M&A in London with KPMG, and I, sold everything, became nomadic. One of the first things I looked at was like impact VC, and thinking how do, impact VCs are often operating in places where there's even less access to knowledge and resources than typical VC. And so I had this question of, could you bring operational expertise to support the founders, and then also better reporting to help understand the non-financial value that's being driven, to give investors, the same kind of juice you would get from a typical just what's the highest return. VC is so long term in terms of the investment. It's challenging.
And that's go on, sorry.
No, go for it.
That's something I'm super passionate about. One of my good friends and mentors, Eddie Wilson. He sold over 120 companies. He's very focused on processes and systems. And I think that's something people miss in the VC world sometimes is they're so focused on growth, which is awesome. But also let's focus on how do we create sustainable growth? How do we build systems, processes? I went from like a visionary to when I did, TP, private equity consulting, everything like that. I learned how to be an executioner. And I believe execution is key to any success in life. But that's exactly our goal with founders and funders. Like as we, the community side is super important, but really the goal long term is building that VC fund and growing it. And our whole thesis is going to be around we will only invest in companies if we can add immense value to you and we can be a part of that journey with you. And I think exactly what you talked about, like impact investing, like understanding the value add of strategic investing is so important. And I think we'll continue to see that change in VCs and family offices, private equity, even angel investors.
Yeah. And that's my secret, not so secret goal is I've spent the last 4 years living in Latam, getting very into the ecosystem and contributing my expertise in ways. And then my goal is to set up a small angel syndicate with, people who have different expertise than mine so that we can always, obviously choose the right investments, but always be able to choose, who needs to be in with them at each stage with the funds. Because I think that's kind of one of my personal goals in that space. I think the earlier you are, the more important the like strategy and expertise is. And so not to say that no one else is doing it, but having looked at a lot of syndicates, it's not, I haven't seen much of that. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna figure out how to do it, and I think I also just really have a passion to see more women in the space. I think that everyone should have male and female mentors. So I think
100%. Honestly, I think you would really love it and you would add so much value. Like, I think when you're looking at VC firms, especially when you're looking at general partners, it's like, who would you want to have on your cap table? And I think so many people would love to have you on the cap table of like really understanding the systems and processes and understanding how to scale the business. So no, you have to keep me updated on that. I'm excited to hear more.
yeah, we'll definitely be tapping in to,
Yeah.
complement each other. And to your point, I love what you said about going from being a visionary to understanding kind of the operator integrator role. Like often you need, I'm actually score really high on visionary, but I am like off the charts on integrator. And so, the systems, the governance, the process, but the people, right? Like businesses, even today with all the beautiful technology that we have, there's a reason that you are so successful. People, whether it's your team, whether it's your clients, whether it's your partners, like you have to see how all of the parts work with people and you have to understand people enough. And I think I always kind of joke, like superpowers is something I talk to my clients about, like what is the intersection of your skills that is really unique that drives the business? And like, how do we spend more time there? And like, mine is the intersection of all this experience and structure around strategy and operations. Great. It's not that uncommon, right? Like a lot of people could do that. And also like, it's also where I know I need to be fueled up because I can facilitate you through that on 2 hours sleep. Like I can do the structure, but my superpower is that intersecting with my ability to read people really quickly and dial into what might be driving that or what do we need to explore when you say, no, we can't do that. Like knowing which one and where to like dive deeper, like that intersection, I think is really key. And I think that is often the growth I talk about when I say like, entrepreneurship leadership is like whether you think you signed up for it or not, it's a personal development course and you have to learn to understand yourself and understand others and then work that connection to its optimal benefit for everybody, right? Like win-win is the best, in my opinion, the best way to build anything.
Yeah. No, you touched on a super important part is understanding yourself. And that's something like, again, part of behind the journey or the title that you don't see is like I also went through therapy because I felt like I could learn more about how to control my thoughts or control how do I be a better person? Like every day I wake up and I'm like, how do I be the best husband, the best, future father, and the best leader I can be? And I think understanding yourself and going deeper into that is so, so important. And yeah, I mean, we're seeing a massive shift of people realizing how important that is in our lives, being an entrepreneur, being obsessed, but still finding that harmony and remembering what's most important.
Yeah. I mean, obsession is fire, right? And fire is dangerous. So
Yep.
it can fuel incredible things, right? Take it way back, locomotives, right? You are burning stuff to get across a large distance. And fire is what causes explosions and it burns things to the ground. And so much, I think, of successful, scalable, sustainable, profitable entrepreneurship is understanding how to leverage your obsession and your fire and like what grows it, what protects it. I think that that's so key. So I love that you said that. I'm gonna take it back. You're becoming a father. That's a huge milestone. That's a huge shift. And I'm
Hmm.
wondering, I talk a lot about wealthy leadership, which is just, my branded term of success on your terms. So baby's on the way, so exciting, just a few months away. What is, the headline of this new chapter and how has it maybe shifted your definition of success and what you're willing to trade off? Because everything comes at a cost.
Totally. Yeah. No, I've thought a lot about this and I think about this a lot, like not just becoming a father, but also even before that, like figuring out like what does success mean to me, right? And like at what cost? Like I think it's easy to say, oh, well, I don't care about the money. I just care about adding that, like living a great life. But, it's so easy for people to lose sight of that. Like I remember there were times where I was working and I was trying to close a deal and I was like, no, babe, like I'm doing this because of our future family, right? And in reality, is that the most fair thing to say? Like, could I have not taken that call at that time? And finding that harmony, like, I don't know if I believe in balance yet. Maybe someone will teach me a different way, but I believe in finding that harmony, which Jeff Bezos talks about a lot, is super, super important. Um, I went through a really interesting journey over the last even 6, 7 months, even before that, where I had to reset. I left a business partner, had to restructure and rebuild and figure out like what do I want to focus on. And during that time, I learned that uh, you have to figure out what is your focus and what is your main goals, right? If your main goals is to build, a massive business and make millions of dollars, like I think you will end up falling short of being happy, honestly. But what for me personally, and I think every person's different, is figuring out signal versus noise and figuring out like what is most important. Like I am truly, and I've learned a lot from Eddie Wilson about this, but truly being intentional with my time. And I think a lot of people talk about that, and it's always an ongoing effort to figure out. But like scheduling and like, okay, we are going to do date night, at this time, or hey, I'm going to schedule out my dinner during this time. I'm gonna, set it aside. If it wasn't for my wife, honest, like I'm a workaholic already. Like I just love business; it's my favorite hobby. But if it wasn't for my wife, I wouldn't have a lot more like foundation and structure around that, and she helps me stay grounded. And so I think going in, and I still don't know the right answers, and I'm happy to receive any advice from any new parents, but understanding like this time I'm going to be intentional with my baby and with my wife, and also setting up those parameters with my wife even beforehand of like, I don't get paternity leave, right? Like I've never had PTO. I don't know what exactly that is, but figuring out how to find boundaries in my life. And so, anyways, I know that is like a big answer for your question. And honestly, the short answer is just like, I'm still figuring it out. Like the most important thing is like signal versus noise, figuring out who I should put in my life, where I should put my energy, and being really intentional of that. And I'm doing that right now of setting my goals and setting my focuses for 2026. And then I honestly, I believe that it's going to make me even more successful having a child because I think it will force me to be really, really intentional with my time. And also just continue to remind me of what is most important, which is my family, and I think that's a big thing is like truly like as long as I'm taking care of my family and I could go deeper into like, you know, growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. I had the means, but I was always stressed out about money, even when I was younger. So I want to make sure my family's comfortable. But outside of that, like, I just want to enjoy the journey. And I think every single person needs to think truly, like, what do you want that to look like? And what does happiness look like for you?
I think that that's beautiful and so important. And I also think having a child is something that forces perspective. I actually remember when I was quite a bit younger, I was in my kind of first few years of my consulting life. So I was, it was 2 a.m. I was in the office all the time. And I was working on a project a little bit outside of my usual kind of industry. And so I was working with a partner I hadn't worked with before. And she, before the acquisition, had been the first female partner or youngest female partner. I think she was maybe the first female partner and the youngest. And she, at that point, had 2 kids. And she came into my office after seeing that I was basically propping up the analyst assigned to me, who I didn't realize at the time had already decided he was leaving. I was just like, why is this guy like not giving a shit? And I'm working in this, client is super important and I'm not going to, stress the partner out. I'm just going to sort it out. When she came in, she obviously got wind of whatever. And she said to me, if you're not going to have a family, you need to get better at boundaries, because that will force you to get perspective and boundaries around your work time and your resilience and the rest of your life. But if you're not going to do that, and then she made reference to another person in this company who didn't have that, who was just always at work, and she was a little bit older, and she was like, if you're not going to have that, you're going to end up like this person. And it wasn't maybe like the nicest reference, but I mean, this is probably 15 years ago, and I still remember that conversation because it was true, right? Like, whether it's an internal shift or a little bit of a societally acceptable reason to get better at having boundaries, evolution or society, doesn't really matter. It is true, right? Like, it creates a clear divide and it creates some clarity for most people. And I think what you said, though, is like, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your family situation or kind of life path choices are. Understanding what makes you tick and what is truly important and what fulfills you will make you better at business, and will ensure that when you hit those more financial or growth goals, that you feel good about it.
Totally. No, I agree. It's such a hard question though, right? Like, I have a really hard time with boundaries because, like, sometimes I don't want to set those boundaries with my wife and then disappoint her, right? But it's so important to set those boundaries. And I have learned, through the hard way, that sometimes when you create more boundaries and you create time to focus on the things that are outside of the business, your business actually does better. It's funny because I forget that, even though, so I had brain surgery 3 years ago. And it was actually when I had brain surgery, I probably shouldn't have been working, but I was working a little bit during it. But I had brain surgery right before I got the biggest deal, and it like started taking off my business. And I was like so worried about everything falling apart, all of these things. But what I forgot was I put systems in place, I put peoples in place, I put relationships in place. I don't have to be on every call, right? I don't need to reply to somebody immediately. And I think sometimes that's hard because my brain is like, oh, someone sent me a message, like, I need to reply to them right away. But as I created those boundaries, I actually had more success during that time. And that doesn't mean every single time is going to be exactly like that experience, but yeah, I'm still learning about how to set boundaries because it's a scary thing, because I don't want to disappoint people either, right? And so my wife and I even having conversations about that right now with the baby, and I'm like, figuring out what the best way to set those boundaries. So no, that's really amazing advice that you got, and it's so important to continue to remind yourself and remember
Yeah, I took
those
it and
lessons.
changed
Yeah.
like as well. And I went through a lot of different growth paths that required me to understand boundaries in different ways. Like, actually, like, the more I let people in, the more I had to have healthy boundaries, rather than just like very hard, not really letting people in, not really having a lot of close personal relationships, right?
Yeah.
Big shifts. I love what you said, though, because what I heard was you went through something that forced you to stress test your systems. And so that is so important, as well as the fact that like technology has evolved so much faster than our human brains can evolve. And this like, oh, someone has communicated to me, I need to respond. Yeah, in person. Like you can't just blank out when someone's standing in front of you, but an email isn't the same as like, just ignoring someone who's in front of you. But yeah, I think it's the systems thing and the boundaries. It's funny because when I started, I was very in this business, very focused on strategy and operations and work. And through all of this is how you need to, processes and governance and delegation and communication and boundaries, all of my clients then were like, well, I am so much healthier and happier at work, and I'm clear, and I think better, and I make decisions better because we have this strategy, we have this, but also I, lost 10 kilos and stopped drinking, and my marriage is better, and I've this health thing that I've been trying to do is like finally working. And it was like, oh, well, because you did the thing at work, but that also translates to home, right? Like if you can't set boundaries at home, you probably can't set them with your team. And if you can't set them with your team, you probably can't set them at home. And most of, the archetype of so many leaders I work with is they're over functioning. They are trying to be everything for everyone, not disappoint anyone. And then ultimately you are actually generally, I hesitate to say letting everyone down because sounds very harsh, but like underperforming and underachieving because you're trying to do it all instead of stepping back, like you said, and being like, okay, like where could this actually be better handled by somebody else? And it's a bit of an upfront investment, but then it's going to completely change what the next, months and years look like.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I keep referencing Eddie Wilson, but it's like I've learned so much through that mentorship. But he talks about that every business is in 5 stages, right? So you have startup mode, you have perseverance mode, you have viability, you have scale, and then you have exit. And I think it's super hard for people to figure out like where to find that balance, where to delegate when you're in that startup mode. Because sometimes it's literally just you. And sometimes businesses, people have, like, I've seen people that are solo entrepreneurs, they do amazing. I would never do that personally. I think having that team around you is so important, or having at least a support system, however that looks like. And so it's hard to be like, oh, well, I can't delegate because I don't have any employees. But I think it's so important to think about what are those processes and systems, and how do you get to a spot where you can delegate instead of focusing on stressing out about delegating right now. It's like really fast and really quickly, how do you get to perseverance mode? Because the companies that fail, like they say 95% of companies fail, it's because they stay in that startup mode, right? But no, I 100% agree with you. And it's such a hard balance in entrepreneurship, because I'm sure there's so many people like your listeners that listen and they're like, yeah, but I don't have any employees and I don't have enough money to hire employees. But it's like, how do you think about those processes and systems and to build that foundation so you can delegate?
It's the same way in a job. You got to do the job before you get the promotion.
Yes.
Same thing in your company, right? Like, how do you structure the different roles that you do every week and and time
Yeah.
it and delegate to yourself and document the process and teach an AI to do a piece of it, and all of those things do not cost money, right? They cost time, but again, so many people, like you said, businesses don't get there because they don't have the long-term perspective. They're like, I can't do that. I don't have time. You have to invest time to save time, just like you have to spend money to make money, right? And like, I really, really believe in that. You mentioned your wife a number of times in these conversations that I love to hear that you're having. How important do you think your, life partner is in how successful you can be in business?
Oh my gosh, Alex, people say when you get pregnant, like women get more emotional. I feel like after my wife has gotten pregnant, like I get more emotional. Like I'm just like, she's the world. Like she means everything to me. And I honestly tell her this all the time, and I truly mean it. Like I would not have the success or the opportunities and the person I am today if it wasn't for her. And I think everyone has their own journey, other ways to find, that partner and everything like that. But I think when you're able to find somebody that, truly believes in you, and I think the most important thing is, I don't know, it's hard to say the most important thing, but a really important thing is do your goals and dreams excite you? And does her goals and dreams excite you, or his goals and dreams excite you? And can you align them where it doesn't have to be exact same goals, but they drive you and you're excited about their goals, right? Because if that life that you guys both are dreaming of align, and you guys believe in each other and you believe in that person, I mean, it's so powerful. I mean, also on top of that, like, my wife, she is like, she's an analytical brain. I'm very much of a people brain, more of a like person, business development, etc. And so she even helps like grounding me of like, hey, let's think about the budget, let's think about the financials, let's think about, certain details that I maybe overlook, or I'm more focused on the vision, right? And so finding that partner that is able to, you're able to really have real conversations. Um, Eddie talks about this. They say, you need to have two mentors. One mentor that you can be totally honest with, and they can be totally honest with you. And honestly, like, I feel like my wife is that mentor for me. Like, she knows me better than anyone else, and she's willing to call me on my crap, or willing to tell me like, hey, I think you should look at these differently. And that's just honestly the biggest blessing in my life.
I love that. It sounds almost like you're talking about a balance of compatibility or complementary, but I'm going to say compatibility and compersion, where like
Yes.
other people success or happiness like drives your own. And so obviously you need to, be in alignment, because compatibility doesn't work if you want things that are so different, but there's
Yes.
that like compatibility and compersion. I'm curious as well, because I always tell people, paperwork makes good partnerships. And that actually applies more so when you want to work maybe with a friend, and, building a business with a friend, and even I think more so with a romantic partner, can be risky, right? There you are creating multiple relationship dynamics with one human, and that can be a challenging place to navigate. That can be, understanding when you're on and you're off, the different relationships you have. Are there lessons that you guys have learned that you think have allowed you to so successfully navigate that, if anyone's listening and either thinking about doing it or is doing it and is like, this is really hard?
I know you said the paperwork and the different sides. I feel like that makes me think of like prenups and everything. Are you more thinking of like systems that like, things that we do like ongoing that helps us be on the same page, or?
Question. I'm thinking of a lot of things. So when I was talking about paperwork makes it partnerships, it's really clarifying expectations and ensuring that you are on the same page about things, which I think is easier when you are strangers. And so even for friends, you ascribe a lot of benefit of the doubt or assumptions when you know someone well, which actually can be really bad for business, right? Like just assuming you're on the same page. So good paperwork makes good partnerships. It is a bit like a prenup. It's like set the ground rules of how you're going to handle things when you're in a good place, so that you just have to handle them whether you're in a good place or not when stuff happens, right? So that's the kind of good paperwork makes good partnerships: expectation setting, clear communication, no room for, misunderstandings. For you, I'm more curious, I think, around how do you navigate, being business partners, business associates, and being husband and wife? How do you, those are two very different dynamics typically.
Yeah, I mean, your first side of the business partner, like I learned that the hard way. I am a huge, huge believer on just having all of the hard conversations. Like a lot of people don't want to ask, like, hey, what do your personal finances look like? If you're going into business, you should ask, you have the right to ask that, because that business partnership, I mean, that is a true partnership. Like it's almost like a marriage in some ways. And startup and running a startup with another partner, it's like a marriage where you don't know exactly what's going to be thrown at you, and understanding that. Like when I went into Founders and Funders, I sat down with Jeff and Inger. We had probably an 8.5 hour meeting, and my wife was there as well. And we talked about everything. Like I created a list of all these questions we go through, and let's talk about all of the uncomfortable conversations, the exciting conversations. Like let's really go deep into it. And so, I mean, yeah, you and I could talk a lot about that because I think that's so crucial in any partnership. I think it's the same thing with marriage. I mean, you don't have to like write out all the questions and like, hey, let me, because you should know all those questions already. But also too, I mean, look, there's marriages that they have its separate finances and, things are different. So like figure out what works best for you. But yeah, be totally open. I think with my wife and I, she's, yeah, she's active in the business, but also like there's a different structure of like how active, especially like her main focus is being a mom. I've been able to give her that opportunity to do that. And so it's been interesting because I mean, technically she owns more of the business than I do, but um, so I remind her of that sometimes. But I think the most important thing is communication, right? Like in a business partnership or a marriage, and I'm not perfect at this. And if my wife was on here, she'd be like, "Yeah, but let's talk about these points." It is just communicating. Like, let's talk about what what are you frustrated about? Let's understand. How do we overcome these challenges? Let's understand what's the most important thing. Like, when we first got married, we didn't have, much finances or anything like that. So we had to learn how to be, really frugal and understand where we're going to put our money. And I loved those years and I'm so grateful for that. And I got married very young. And that was part of our journey. I think also even now it's like understanding, hey, this time during dinner, I don't care if you keep working afterwards or before, but setting those boundaries of like, I just want you to be present during this time. And I was bad. Like I would take calls during dinner, I would do texting, and now I've gotten really good at like I'm putting my phone away, I'm being present because just like any relationship, people want to feel valued and important. And it's the same thing in marriage. And so, anyways, I am, not perfect at marriage. I'm still learning and growing on that. But I think, one of my favorite songs is by Ben Platt about marriage is Grow As We Go. And it's like, just continue to grow as we go and be okay with not perfection and be open about, hey, I'm not going to be perfect at this, but I will do my best. Right. And really be intent about that. I think is so important in a relationship and in a business relationship. Like truly, they are so similar.
Of that. And I think back to a lot of very high level leaders and CEOs that I worked with who had these, non-negotiables, whether it was like kids' bedtime, like dinner and bedtime. They might work after until whenever, but it was like that was very sacred time. It was communicated. These are CEOs of FTSE 100 companies, and they're just like, that's it. Or like bicycling my child to school in the morning is not a negotiable. Like I do that, and most of them, whether they were men or women, had a spouse who was more flexible, and I think there is that element. But I think the ones who had that often were also, again, the ones who had the best clarity and conversation and communication and boundaries within the business as well. Like it wasn't those ones were the ones where like, they were all right. Like they were often like the best leaders I worked with. And I found that really a fascinating thing to observe across lots of different cultures, lots of different industries, lots of different countries. You talked about balance and before, and I just want to come back to it because I think it ties into what we're talking about. I often think of balance as like a surfboard or something, right? It's not a static, right? Staying up on a surfboard is about constant micro adjustments and shifting, and then you want to go and speed up, you got to lean forward, and then you don't want to crash into the waves, so then you got to like hit the brake. And I think that's kind of a visual, I'm a very visual person, so I see that. And then I see whether it's your business partner or your romantic partner as the person who, when it gets really wavy, and now I'm going to have to change my metaphor because they're not standing in ocean, so I'm going to say skateboard, like they're the person who like you can grab their hands and they can help you stabilize until you got it back again. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that resonates for you, but that's kind of what I'm hearing as I'm listening is like, there's the internal work, you went to therapy, you worked on yourself, emotional regulation, self-awareness, and then there's the understanding that there are people in your life who you can equally, maybe it's not always equal, but like back and forth share some stabilization in the harder moments, they're the one on the shore yelling at you like, you don't see this, but you need to step on that brake or you're gonna nosedive.
I love that. You might change my total perspective when I say I don't believe in balance. I believe in harmony. But like that is such a cool visualization, right? It's like there's no like it's not a balance of like, all right, this much work, this much light, or outside of work. It's more about how do you continue to go with the ebbs and flows. And there's times to shut off and just be present and be with your family. And there's also times where, you're going to be working a lot more than maybe you hoped or, other people had hoped. Yeah, I can resonate that in a massive, massive. I love that. We're going to have to talk about that more later because we have to go deeper into this whole analogy. I really like that. Yeah, I think that's exactly it, right? And I think if you don't figure out how to find that balance, then one is going to give. And like you said, if your relationship at home is not the right structure and a lot of stress and all of these things, your business is also going to suffer. And I've seen that with business partners, right? And I think it's very important to be open and aware of business partners of like, where are they at with that balance? And let's really understand that because that I've learned that firsthand. And then vice versa. Like if you are super stressed about business and all of these things and it's all juggling and you take that home with you, like it's going to affect your relationship, right? And I don't remember who it was, but they talked about like right before I get home, before walking the door, I take a breath and I figure out how to not take any negative energy or issues or things that I've run into and take it into my relationship. And I mean, I learned that the hard way as well. Like when I don't know, maybe, I don't know if you feel the same way when you're speaking Spanish, but I feel like I'm a meaner person when I'm speaking Chinese. And so there'll be times like, especially when I was having calls at 12 a.m. or whatever, and I was kind of frustrated and I was figuring out a situation. I probably shouldn't have been frustrated. I shouldn't have taken out, that much emotion. My wife was like, "Hey, you're bringing negative energy here. Like, I need you to not. Like, I need you to have that conversation outside or like figure out how to not have that conversation." And I think that was such a good reminder. It's like, I need to find that balance of the energy I'm bringing into life. Like in entrepreneurship, you're always going to be hitting waves. You're always going to hit trials and tribulations. It's now, how do you ebb and flow with that? And how do you overcome that? And how do you not allow it to mess up your life where now you're so worried about something or you bring that stress or whatever. And I think that goes deeper into what we talked about earlier of like figuring out what are your habits, like figuring out, like you were talking about, you live in Mexico in that area because you figured out like that's where you're the happiest. And I mean, we could talk about this is like, what is your morning rituals? What is your morning habits? Like, how do you figure out how to overcome that stress? Because I think stress can be really good in entrepreneurship. You're going to have that stress no matter what. But how do you use that stress to either drive you and also how do you manage that stress is super, super important.
Well, and one way I love to look at it is, are you problem focused or solution focused? Right? Like
Yes.
when we talk about
Yeah.
that in leadership is like you want a healthy company, you need a great culture. That starts with you. If you are not self-aware and you're not emotionally regulated, good luck. Like it's not going to happen, right? And so one of those things is like, can your team come to you and know that the first thing you're going to talk about is the solution before you start talking about like blame or punishment or
100%.
right? Like that is amazing. And if that and that's contagious, right? Like everything is contagious. Where humans are just microorganisms, right? Like so it always flows from the top. And I think, do you see a problem or do you see an opportunity to find a solution to fix something? Like, oh, I'm so glad this happened now and not in 6 months with XYZ. Like, great, this gives us a chance to figure it out, right? And I'm not saying you don't get frustrated or get upset or, that there aren't consequences. But I think that is really, really important. And it's interesting you say about like, the time, right? Like the reality of entrepreneurship is you don't get to time bound it necessarily into a certain part of your day. Later on, you can start to understand how you work best. And like you said, where you are and what you are. Like I know being able to be outside a lot is really important to me. Being able to have access to relatively easy, healthy food, super important to me. I just over time collected the data that like proximity to water, temperate climate, smaller, like walkable is really good for me. I made a decision not to live in metropolises. I absolutely fucking love New York, Singapore, London, all these places I've lived, love them. There is something about the intensity of the city and my own intensity to amplify and create more isolation for me. I think it's also a little bit of a cultural thing. So all of those kind of geographic or climate type things alongside communal culture with an expat community, perfect for me. Really interesting, like pulls me out of my workaholic, isolated kind of vibes. You know, I have very open door policy with my neighbors. They're like family. That's something I've never experienced. I never even thought I would want. And yet it has like transformed my life.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Community of entrepreneurial people who prioritize health and fitness, right? I was out at 6:30 on Saturday setting up a birthday while my neighbor, I was with the wife, the husband is running this 6 a.m. Saturday workout with 100 people for free, like in this community that we've all been building. So we had a big party from, 7s-ish till 10 a.m. And then there was an evening more, more intimate. So that was like 100 people. That was like the whole community. And then there's kind of like a closer friends event. And we had a section blocked off at this really beautiful restaurant with this gorgeous bar. One of the reasons I love it, it has the incredible mocktails. And so I went, and I was not the only person who didn't drink alcohol on a Saturday night at a friend's birthday. We celebrated, we did the thing, but it started at 7:30 p.m. I was home by 10:30. I slept. I got up on Sunday and I did more work. And that, and the people around me, they understand that. And it's not that nobody drinks. It's not that I never do, but that vibe, I have never had that anywhere else I've lived. And I think it's a trend. I think it's a demographic. I think it's choosing the people. But I am the biggest believer that your environment is and your people and your routines, I call them cheat codes, like figuring out. I know people who operate exceptionally well in completely different environments. And I love that. And I would love to spend the summer in New York. I would love to go back to, Singapore or London. I love Mexico City. I would consider splitting my time between here and there. And I know that 12 months of the year in any of those one environments just wouldn't be the optimal for me. So
Yeah. And that's probably, I think, out of anything we can do in life is understanding like your mind and your body is like one of the most powerful things you can do, right? Like and again, every single person's different. You can't just look at it as like, oh, like this person's wake at 4 a.m. and they're successful. Like I need to wake up at 4 a.m. It's like figuring out what works for you, finding that community, whatever that looks like. If that's, entrepreneurs, if that's family, if that's church, if that's, whatever it is, work, etc. Finding that support around you, finding those habits that work for you. But I don't know. There's a lot of people that are super successful and they don't have like any of that. And I'm just like, you're incredible because like I need all of this to be able to like, be able to work at this level. Like I can't do it. Like if I'm not finding that rhythm in my mornings and, waking up in the morning, getting a workout in, eating healthy, like meditating, those things, like I'm not able to work at this level. I truly am not.
I mean, counterpoint, imagine how they would operate if they had all that, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Definitely
Yeah.
tides. But I think it's also, you learn as you go. And again, you trial and error, you build things up. You also have to kind of understand that you evolve, as do your goals in certain ways, or I call it like seasons, right? So to your point, having a baby is going to be a new season, but and I keep coming back to your wife, just I think it's amazing that you guys have this incredible conversations, and now she's in the business. And I think you've shared with me this before, but so hopefully I'm right. How do you differentiate business partner and husband and wife? Like that dynamic. Like, do you guys have a clear divide of like, the reason I ask is you talked about, the energy you're bringing in this. And one thing I talk about is like, you need to know like what your leader persona is and what your like home persona is. And that's, your values don't change, but the expression does. And I think it's a challenge for everyone, but I will say I've noticed it more in women. And then maybe that's like a polarity thing of like the energy of work and the energy that you want to be in at home are so different, but the switch off can be really hard. And I've worked with clients to figure out what works for them. And, some of them, there's various things, but especially because we all work at home a lot of the time, we don't necessarily have like, oh, my commute is my like brain flow switch to be this, wife, mother, whatever, or even just like human who isn't running a company. Like, what is that? And I'm wondering, even more so when the person at home is the same person that you're seeing at work, like, how do you handle that?
Yeah, totally. Honestly, the full answer is like, I don't know the right answer, because I haven't figured out, like, again, going back to that whole analogy, that's where I have a hard time with balance. Because in balance, in my eyes, the way I think a lot of people, the way people look at balance is this is work, this is outside of work, right? Like 9 to 5, I'm done with, like, my brain will never, ever, ever work that way. That's where I like your analogy. And honestly, I don't. I think a really important part is like having an understanding partner, and understanding like who I am, and again, kind of going back to the whole paperwork thing, like what you're signing up for, but at the same time, remembering like there is a harmony in there. I mean, one thing communication wise, like I think I am a very similar person as a business owner as I am just in real life. I really work hard to like be authentic. And there used to be a time where, people talked about like, oh, you don't want to give too much like appreciation, all stuff. But I'm like, that's who I am. So like, that's the type of leader I'm going to be. Right. But like, yeah, on Slack or WhatsApp, I'll text her as like her business partner or boss or whatever you want to call it. And then text message, I'm talking to her as my wife. So like, it's like very much like I will never ask her to do anything business wise over text. Right. So I think that's super important. And then, yeah, I think just figuring out what works best for you. And then, like you said, like, I don't like it's kind of like that surfboard where sometimes you're feeling like you're tipping, like, oh, I'm not giving enough intention with my wife at this time. Like, I need to shut off. Right. And the nice part is, like, she is very good at helping me find that balance of like understanding, but also like, hey, I'm okay if you work, all day tomorrow, not come back because you have an event till 10:30, but like at this moment I just like need you to be present, and reminding of me of that is like a huge blessing in my life and really important. So yeah, I don't know if that I ever will find a perfect, like, where is that boundary. Maybe one day, I don't know, but I think finding that harmony and finding that ebbs and flow on the surfboard like you talked about is super important. And again, finding somebody that understands that, and you're willing to have those communication and talk about it when you're feeling like there is too much leaning one way.
I mean, I think that is the definition of boundaries, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
two ends of the extreme. People who don't let anyone close to them have overly firm boundaries, and people who have, we say no boundaries, they're just like crazy permeable. Like, like you just basically don't have them, but it's just they're too flexible. And so,
Hmm.
really, boundaries are malleable and adjustable, but they require communication. And what you said about the communication channels, actually, I love that. I think that's such a good, clear way. And I think, again, I'm just going to go back to seasons over and over. If you are both passionate about it and you are both in the business, there will be times where you're like, yeah, let's talk about the business over dinner. Hey, let's, but like just intentional. Like, hey, are you available
Hmm.
for tonight to be a business conversation? And also, like, hey, what I really need in the next week is like a date night that is completely not the business. And
Yes.
that might be something that is every week in some seasons and almost not at all in others. And as long as you guys are aligned on that, like, I don't think there's one answer for everyone. That I don't think there's like a golden standard for how
Totally.
that works.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's a blessing to have a partner that I can talk about business, and like they get it and they understand it. And there's a lot of people that like, their partners have no idea what they do, and they work, and that's awesome. But yeah, it's a huge blessing to be able to really like be able to talk about it. But like, yeah, there is times where she's like, hey, this date night, let's not talk about business. And sometimes, honestly, I'll be admit, like, it's hard for me sometimes, and I have to like kind of figure out how to like do that sometimes. But no, yeah, for sure. I think that's super, super, super true. So,
Yeah, and I think it again comes down to understanding yourself and choosing, right? Like I recognized a long time ago that I am not somebody who can really separate, fulfillment purpose from work. Like I just, and
hmm
some people really do, and they're not necessarily 9 to 5ers, but there are people who are, able to have more like this is what I do and this is how I earn money and like this is what really fulfills me or whatever. And I'm not. And so, if I look around at the close friends that I have and things, in one way or another, they either understand or really appreciate that about me. So a lot of them are entrepreneurs or business owners or whatever you want to call it.
hmm
And if they're not, there's something else about the relationship that glues us, and then they appreciate it, even if it's not something that they firsthand experience understand. And that's just kind of the reality at this point. I mean, it wasn't always that way, and I think that's like again, as you age and as you go through, you kind of curate and narrow things down. But I think if you are someone who is more separate, it maybe does give you a wider pool of who you're compatible with.
100%. I agree. Yeah. Entrepreneurship is not for anybody, everybody. And, being a partner to an entrepreneur is also not for everybody either.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I love what you said about like, there's not one way. Like, I love the internet, but it's made it that there are very loud voices telling you that like, this is the one way and it's for everybody. And all you have to do is X, Y, Z, and then you'll be this amazing entrepreneur. And like, I just
hmm
don't really believe in that. You talked about being very similar in your leadership and in who you are. And I think that that is kind of the key to being a good leader is being able to be very authentic.
hmm
Are there specific experiences that have shaped your leadership, or are there things that you learned that really helped you unlock the ability to galvanize a team towards a goal?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's something that have a heart, before I used to be like, oh, well, where do I share parts of my life that aren't about business? For example, faith. Like have a very strong faith. I also believe that anybody can believe in whatever they want to, and I believe we're all striving to do the same thing, which is what religion is. But when I lived in Taiwan, I was there for a church mission, and I had the opportunity to be a leader of 250 other people, and I learned so deeply about leadership and about loving others. And finding that balance in work, I haven't figured out fully because there's times where I try to I never call my employees family because that gets really really complicated. Like you would never fire a family member, you would never give a bonus to a family member, but finding team members, I will say I have a hard time where if my employee's having a really hard time with family or, something complicated or health related, like I go further than probably most. Like I put a friend hat on instead of business owner. And I don't know if that's wrong and I'm figuring that out. But going back to it, I think that's why, like, I've found that if you have a genuine care for that person, of them growing as a person, right? Like respecting them as a very talented individual and making sure you're hiring the right people that fit those things, obviously, and that fit those parts. And we could talk about that. I really believe in A players, B players, C players, but yeah, I think it gave me a lot of opportunities to do that. And then when I went into a business one time, there was about 50 employees, and there was somebody in there in HR that was really taking advantage of the situation, and she was creating systems and processes that basically benefited her and benefited the people that she hired. Anyways, and so I had to during that time, I got very very intentional about finding the people inside that really had a passion and a drive to put their all in, right? Like whenever I hire somebody, I don't like, yes, I look at their resume briefly, and usually somebody, maybe deeper into it goes deeper into the questions and tell me a time when this happened. But really, what I'm looking for, I don't really do that much for those interviews. What I'm looking for is this person, you know, let me understand this person as an individual and understand like what do they stand for? What are they passionate about, right? Like understanding their personality and, are they going to put their all in? Are they going to, and so I try to find that. And I feel like once you find those type of people that are really going to align with the people you want in your organization, it's a lot easier to be a leader to them as well. Because you're going to treat them, you're not going to try to micromanage them, because if you micromanage them, you've already failed, right? If you're micromanaging someone, it's usually something that you're doing wrong as a leader, and also possibly that person might be the wrong fit, right? And so finding people that you can trust, you can rely on, and that is really going to put their all in is super important to be a good leader as well. And that means you need to be uplifting people and helping people grow as an individual themselves.
I love that. I think we used to call it like kind of the airplane test in consulting. I was like, I can teach you most things, but if I don't want to sit with you for 8 hours on a plane, or I can't trust my clients with you, then no. How do you kind of go about finding out if somebody what is it in those interviews that you're looking for? How do you assess that?
That's a good question. I don't know if I figured out like the perfect way to do it, but like a lot of times when I meet somebody, I just ask them like, give me a high level of like who you are, right? Like, what are you passionate about? What do you enjoy? What do you love learning about? Like, just give me a high level. And it's really interesting to see, some people will just focus on work, and some people also will find that intertwined. And I don't think if they talk about just work and just life, it's not a red flag to me. But what I'm looking for is like, let's understand, is this person a really passionate person in they're doing, if that's in sports, or if that's understanding systems and event planning, or marketing or whatever. And let me understand during their journey that they showed like they went the extra mile, like honestly. And and I think it's probably just the journey I'm on. Like, I'm not running a publicly traded company and I have 1,000 employees. Like, I need people that are self-starters and driven. And I think you need that as well when you're higher up. But I'm looking for people almost like are entrepreneurs in their mindset, right? Like, I'm looking for people that like want to like build a business basically. Because there's a great book called Ready, Fire, Aim. Or no, sorry, Ready. Yeah, Ready, Fire, Aim. Yeah. And they say the first 7 people you hire is the most important people you hire. After that, it's 7 times 7, because they believe, you can have 7 direct reports. And the thing is as you hire more and more people, and I've seen this myself, and you get further away from those first 7 people, if you don't have such solid culture and drive or whatever, you're going to start having less A+ players. You're going to have less people that are just star players. And so I'm really looking for those people that are really going to be self-starters themselves. Kind of have that entrepreneur mind. And then I also ask a question. I think Elon Musk asked this question, but he says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how lucky you are? Because I do believe luck has a lot to do with it. And it's really interesting to see people's like answers for that and why they think that they're lucky. Anyways, and so yeah, that's kind of a little bit of a strategy I do when I'm hiring the people.
I think that's really interesting to hear. I asked that because I think there's a little bit of a conversation I've heard over time about people who are good interviewers versus good employees, and like how do you overcome that? And obviously, metrics and tests is one way, but I think every successful leader has a way of like figuring that out. And I think people skills, we talked about that at the beginning of this conversation, is fundamental to being a good leader, a good entrepreneur. And I think what you're looking for, something I also look for is I call it intrapreneur. So it's like somebody who's an intrapreneur, who they maybe don't want to be the owner and the ultimate decision and wear all the hats, but in their lane, they are going to own it. They are going to grow it. They are going to take accountability and responsibility and really be fundamental to their part of the business, and ideally interconnect into the others, so that, really strategically and proactively as well, because they understand enough and they have enough of that mindset to understand that it's an ecosystem and not silos.
Yeah. I mean, I even think about myself, right? Like when I got the job, and I was running my own company at the same time, but I got a job being a consultant. And I basically, how I did it was I built a really good relationship with the founder, and I helped him understand who I was as a person. Look, I'll be honest with you. Like, if I went through their regular recruiting process of like 5 different stages and all these tests and all these things, I probably would never got it. Like on paper, I probably wouldn't be the best fit for that role. But and it's the same thing with people maybe I even hire too. It's like I'm looking for somebody that stands out and is that entrepreneur, like you said. And so yeah, I think it's super, super important. And it's hard to find those people. And I've made mistakes. I've hired the people that I thought was that. And, obviously I found out really fast. And, they say, be slow to hire, but quick to fire. I'm not the best at that sometimes. Like there's times where I've let people go longer because I believe in them and I don't, I see that they have that potential. But yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. Finding that entrepreneur is so important.
And we learn, everything's data, right? You learn along the way. You learn about like what you maybe missed or what didn't, work out within the ecosystem for that person. And you said earlier really about investing in people and understanding them across the board, not just in their role, and caring. And I think you should kind of always be coaching, promoting, or firing. I think there's a longer list, but like that's kind of, but I really talk a lot often about difficult decisions, but also uncomfortable conversations. And so if you're having the uncomfortable conversations along the way, then you're like coaching that person, you're giving them an opportunity to adjust and see if what you saw in them like does manifest. And then to your point though about caring, the difficult decision, keeping someone in a role that they're just not succeeding in is a disservice to them, right? Everyone wants to be a successful human. No one wants to languish in a role that they're like okay at. And so it's a disservice, obviously, to the company, to the other team members, to the bottom line usually, but to them too. And so real leadership, and I think this is where people confuse maybe being nice and being kind. Like real leadership is doing what's best for the whole and moving that person on if they're not, self-aware or galvanized enough to be like, this isn't right, I'm going to go work somewhere else. That is kind. It's hard, but it's genuinely kind.
Yeah, I think having those uncomfortable conversations, going back to like a partner, business partner, employees, like I believe that actually is crucial to be a successful leader, is being willing to have those uncomfortable conversations. I mean, I've had business partners in the past where they are really, really hard and they have a really hard time making those hard decisions. And I think in business, you can't wait. Like you have, like, yes, quick, be slow to assume, quick to understand all the facts. Like I believe that and I live that. But once you make that decision, be willing to have those conversations, because if you don't, then, like you said, it's a disservice to yourself and also to the company and to the people.
I fully agree. It sounds really basic, but I'm like, when you know. But the gap between knowing and acting, that's where the damage usually happens.
100%. Yeah.
You've been in a lot of, you've referenced mentors, you've been in a lot of big rooms, you've moved through, I think you were recently featured in Forbes and are now on the Forbes Business Council. So getting to meet people and finding people that you wanted to be part of early on, and now getting, more and more connections and growth and visibility. Talk to me about visibility, it's something that people talk about. It's comfortable for some, uncomfortable for others. I know for me, it was like a big hurdle to be the actual face of my company, not, the person maybe beside somebody else. And ironically, my business is still kind of aimed at being that person for others, but I still have to run it and be out there. Does it contribute to growth? Is it required? I don't know if this is a branding question.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of pieces of visibility. Like there's visibility of understanding all the processes and systems and the people. And then there's also visibility of like sharing who you are. Honestly, I'm terrible at social media, and like I don't love social media. Like I've deleted social media for the last like 3, 4 years, except for LinkedIn, right? Like I don't enjoy it. But I think it is like, especially with the way the world is today, like it's really important that you are visible, that you're sharing your story. I mean, there's so many people that go deep into this. Gary Vee talks about it all the time. Eddie Wilson, he built Aspire Tour, which is the largest business conference in the world. And before that, he was not visible at all. And he's even pushed me to say, hey, you need to get in front of it, because if you're able to be visible, I think it was Grant Cardone that told him, he said, do you have a hard time finding more money? Do you have a hard time finding great people? Do you have a hard time with opportunities? No, but would you like to have more? It's like, if you're visible, people know what you're about. There's credibility around that, which is super important. And it's important that credibility is authentic, because there's a lot of scams out there. I think it's probably one of the biggest businesses, which is sad. Yeah, so I'm trying to do a better job at that. Like that post I did, talking about, here's what I talked about, what I did in my 20s, building 8-figure business in my 20s. But here's the behind scenes that people don't know. A big part of that is actually ageism, right? Like I used to be so worried about people, judging me for being young in my journey. Like, look, I'm 27 years old right now. I'm having a baby. I've had brain surgery. Like a lot of people say, like I'm 27, but I have like a 60-year-old, 50 or 40-year-old person, like a old soul, which is so true. But like, I used to be so worried about going into a room and somebody saying, hey, you're too young. I don't want you to be here. You're too young. I don't want to work with you. And at times, like that actually affected me a lot. And what I learned was, your age and being authentic in your journey is so, so important. And I'm still working on that. I still believe, I still have to, sometimes prove myself in bigger rooms or whatever. But I'm really trying to be authentic of sharing my story of that, because I've always thrived and worked to try to find those mentors. And sometimes I found somebody that was really successful, but they didn't have the life that I wanted to live. And then there was also times where I found somebody who looked really successful, but wasn't successful. And then I found people that truly align with who I want to be. Even in podcasts, like there's not a lot of podcasts that truly talk about behind scenes of like, how do you balance family and work, right? How do you go through these hard times of financial crisis where you have, cash flow issues, right? Like, how do you figure out your own partners? And that's something that I really want to be able to share of my journey. I'm still very early in my journey. I've had amazing experiences, but like, I'm just starting. Like, keep following me. And I promise you, like, because of the opportunities I have, the blessings I have, and as I continue to put in the people I have around me, like I will, build some amazing things, but I will also go through incredible challenges during it, and I'll find ways to overcome those and learn. And I'm really excited about it. But I think it's super important to build that visibility. So I'm gonna start being better at that, right? Like I'm gonna learn from you of like I'm gonna launch a podcast next year talking about its venture journey by FNF, by founders and funders, and understanding people's journeys. I'm gonna start posting more often and trying to share that story, because I do think it's really important. But yeah, I don't love social media, so I'm gonna have to get over that a little bit. And it's kind of scary when you do your first post. It's scary. So
I love that we could do a whole podcast about what you just said in that last, I don't know, 40 seconds. Like, I relate to so much of what you just talked about. We're definitely going to have you back in like a year or even less. And then you can share about being a new father, starting a podcast, then starting the fund within founders and funders, like right there. One big episode, 3 episodes. But I don't want to like go on a big tangent, but I was also very young, not as young now as you are in my 40s, but I graduated high school young. I did a 4-year degree in 3 years while working. So I came out of that young. I had the like scraped by the 3 years required to get into my MBA that required 3 years of management experience. And I think the people who have, and then I graduated from that. It was the first time I ever took on debt. It was a loan for my MBA. I had worked my way through, and I graduated and got a job out of the housing crisis when no one was getting jobs. I had options. I got into strategy consulting. I was suddenly making more money than I needed after I'd always frankly made less. Like so many things, but I remember going through the interview process for my MBA. And what I was going to say is I didn't think I had people skills, and it took a long time to a partner once I was already in London who was like, you're not. I was like, no, I'm just like a math geek, numbers, not. And he was like, no, you're a leader. Like, we're trying to push you on partner track already. Like, but I didn't realize I was so nervous because I'm thinking I have the bare minimum. I didn't know at the time, but I guessed. And once I got in, I was the youngest person in the program by a mile. But I connected to the interviewer. So now I did my GMAT. It was good. I did have the experience and the letters of recommendation. I happened to be working for surgeons who were heads of departments at a university. So like, great. My letters of recommendation were like interesting. I had done okay in my undergrad, but like, 2 jobs and compressed, like it wasn't the standout. I wrote my letter. I did all the things, but in the interview, the intake coordinator asked me one really hard question because I was implementing some big things in my role at my company. She said, do you not want to see this through? And I gave her my honest answer about it, and I guess it was all right. But her boyfriend was like the head of the Springboks rugby, which is a South African rugby team. And I was a big rugby player. And so we connected on that. And
that's awesome.
Today, I am convinced that is why I got into my program, and not my merit was fine, but like it really could have gone either way. And I was very prepared to not get in that year and then broaden my kind of horizon. But a little bit also of what you said of like, I got a lot of outreach from schools because when your GMAT goes out, like schools can see it and then they can be like, hey, we want to give you a scholarship, we want to do that. And I was just like, I'm not ready to like pick up and move for next year. Like I can't afford it and all these things. I wasn't making very much before my MBA, but I also really liked the program and I really wanted to go to this new program. And talk about luck. I was the last year before it privatized. So I was year 2 of this new program that they were trialing, and then it privatized. I never in a million years would I have been able to afford it once it privatized. So like timing, get that conversation. And I think that there's something about understanding people, even if you don't know you're good at it, like finding those connection points and being really genuine. And I kind of knew I just had to be. I was like, I can't pretend anything. I just have to be. And then also understanding that imposter syndrome is kind of a double-edged sword. Like it kind of drives you. Like the
100%.
Then to me was I went to career services and I was like, yeah, I kind of said like marketing consulting when I came in because I was technically in a, director of marketing role. But what I really want to do is strategy consulting, and like I want to go in this. And they were just like, yeah, though, like that and iBanking are the hardest to get into. Like you should probably spend more time on your plan B. And I was like, aren't you here to help me? Get like what? But again, something about my wiring was just like that. And then I went on to be one of the few people who got a job in there, and with options, like I found the way. And again, connections, being in the student association, being at a dinner with the head of, I want to say Manulife, some big insurance company, who was like, well, why is the undergrad getting interviews with BCG and you aren't? And I was like, well, they're not accepting, master's level applicants because the housing crisis. And he was like, well, that's ridiculous. Like, send me your CV, and the head of BCG is my friend. And then suddenly I went through this interview process, and
that's amazing.
I think, rambling on this story, but I think, like you said, there's luck. There's what is it? Luck favors the prepared.
Yep. 100%.
Willing to go the extra mile, right?
Yeah.
I lived at school. It was the first time I hadn't had a job since I was 11 or 12 years old. I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. Thankfully I was able to get a loan, and I'm just in it to win it. And I had like suit and high heels hanging in our little student association office. I lived there. Like I meal prepped and traded meals with like another friend that I made there. Like we were just, this is our opportunity. And we made it, what it was. And she went into iBanking and I went into consulting, and the rest is history. We're best friends, and I'm godmother to her daughter. But I think there's something about that drive that I'm hearing in what you're talking about. And I think it speaks to also your ability to pick people now, right? Like you found out a way to get chosen and to get in the room, but now you're kind of on the other side of it Does it
Yeah.
feel different?
Yeah, yeah, it feels different, but also too, like I don't think I'll ever get to a point where I'm not trying to get into the room, right? Like kind of like the same thing. Like there's always another mountaintop. There's always, like I think in there's a My First Million and I forgot his name, but anyways, he talks about how like no matter how big of an exit people have or whatever it is, like everyone's a little self-conscious, right? And they're always worried about like getting to the next step or feeling like you're not doing as successful or whatever. And I think that goes, deeper into figuring out like what is success to you and being okay with that, being, happy and mindful. Um, but also too, I think like you said too, it's like, yeah, it's an opportunity where, especially as I continue to grow, I want to give more people that opportunity in the room, right? Like I do think there's a little bit of like in Chinese, it's yuan feng, like having the fate and having the luck. But also too, like you said, Jesse Itzler talks a lot about this, is like being able to put yourself in those moments and in those rooms that allow you to have those opportunities, which is so important. And I'm going to continue to do that. Like I'm always the youngest person in the room or youngest person at the table, but I'm not going to let that, like, as much as there's times where I'm going into those rooms and I'm, maybe self-conscious or worried, but I never allow that to hold me back. Like I find ways to remind myself of like the confidence I have and the person I am and knowing I can add value to those people. And I'm going to receive so much value from them as well, just like learning from people. Right. And I think that's the important part, is like always being like humble enough to know like you'll never, like you always can learn something from anybody you meet with. And so I mean your journey is incredible. Like you, like yes, was there luck, was there timing, was there fate? 100%. But you put yourself in those positions that allowed you to have those moments. And I think every single person, no matter how big or small or wherever they're at in their journey, should be doing that. Like believe in yourself, have that confidence, figure out what your goals are and then go for it, and like figure out a way to get in those rooms, right? Like I believe if I want to go and meet with Elon Musk for whatever reason, maybe I'm crazy, but I believe I could figure out how to meet with him, right? And have a good conversation. And I think that's important, is again, going back to what we talked about before, I see it as a chessboard. It's like, okay, this is what I'm going for. And maybe there's moments inside of that, chess match that I have to go to, but do it in a very normal, natural way, never force anything. And if there's certain people in your life that are like, oh no, you're too young, or no, you're not experienced enough, like that's their loss, right? And so yeah, no, I can totally relate to that story and that journey.
Understanding that confidence follows competence. It doesn't come
Hmm.
before, right? So like you don't feel confident in something until you get better at it, which means you have to
Totally,
do it when you don't feel confident. And I think
totally.
also being okay being underestimated. So that like journey for me didn't end when I graduated in the top 5% of my class and got the job. And I then became very young and female and looking even younger often than I was. Actually, ironically, people thought I was older for a long time because I was just so serious and uptight. It's not really like a recommended solution to anyone out there, but it was really interesting though. Like, that only transmits so much. I would still walk into rooms and people would assume, I worked in mining and energy, natural resources, and I was like a, director, but and my name is very ambiguous, so if you've only emailed with me, you don't necessarily expect me to come walking through the door when you know that like Alex, the engagement director, is like coming to meet
Mm,
you, right? Like that didn't end, but I think there's actually like a beauty in being underestimated, and if you cannot take it personally, right? Like there's so many times in my career where I could have been upset about who someone assumed I was, or even how somebody maybe spoke to me fairly clearly because of, certain elements about who I am. And I think that if you focus on that, you are just dwelling in things you can't control. And like every single time that I came up against something like that, now again, there were so many times I was like terrified for someone to know how young I was, all of these things. But what it drove me to do was just outwork everybody. And like, fine, that's not like a lifelong sustainable maybe way of working, but like in my 20s, in my early 20s, I could do that. And it created a level of competence and experience and network. And yeah, was I a bit strung out? Was I a little uptight? Absolutely. But when I decided to step off that ladder and into the unknown in my 30s, I had a certain amount of money in the bank and a certain amount of like open doors that I could take risks and I could start to work on myself and I could explore and I could do that in a way that, yeah, it's great if you take a gap year and you go traveling and you have fun. I have nothing against that. I think it's amazing. And I kind of did that later in life with this incredible foundation. And it has allowed me to shape my life in a way without having, maybe committed to a specific journey earlier that I'm really grateful for. And I think it's different for everyone. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I think like imposter syndrome can be channeled like most things.
I agree. Oh my gosh, we could have like a whole episode just talking about this because I can relate this on so many levels. I mean, truly, like I was flying out, I fly out to New York City, fly out to London. Like I was meeting with people and they had no idea I was in college. And, is that because they got to know me and I talked with them and they thought I was older? I don't know. But like I never allowed my age or my, where I'm at in my journey to hold me back because I was confident in myself. I never lied to anybody. I would never tell someone like, oh no, I'm this age or whatever. I never lied to anybody. But I honestly never got asked super often either. And so a lot of times like that worry was actually more in my head and I was more worried about it than it actually came. But like you said, it allowed I think it drove me even more, right? And it still drives me, right? And so finding, yeah, I love that. Like competence follows confidence. Like you have to have confidence first, and then you continue to have that competence. And I think if you're not confident, even if you have that competence, you actually won't be able to do the things that you want to do because you'll doubt yourself. And when you doubt yourself, you're going to run into issues. You're not going to be able to execute. You're going to, you're going to not talk because you're worried about something. Like it's so important to have that confidence in yourself. And even when you have that self-doubt, like remind yourself like what you have accomplished and what you're going to accomplish, and your self-worth is so important.
It's like a confidence sandwich. You got to believe in yourself so that you can learn the skill so that you can then be
Yes.
confident in the competence of the skill.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the rooms that you go into, right? And with founders and funders, you're kind of creating a new dynamic of room for investors, for startup founders. What we talked a little bit about the trends and the climate, but what is unique about founders and funders, and what should a startup be thinking about if they're considering venture capital, like to, I don't know, to VC or not to VC?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think you see, to answer your first question, like what is different about it? I mean, one of our main events is a VC reverse pitch, right? So we bring in 100 to 150 founders. Usually, I mean, think of it as a bullseye. The bullseye is a million or more in annual revenue or a million raised. People can be outside of that bullseye and still be in the our target zone. 100,000 more in revenue, 500,000 raised, but they have traction, or 100,000 more in revenue and 100,000 raised, but they've exited a few times, or they're already VC backed, et cetera, right? So think of it as a target. So that's the type of founder that we're trying to bring in the room that hits that. And then we bring it into the room. We bring in 6 VCs. We handpick the VCs just like we handpick the founders. We try to find VCs that are very active in investing. Usually, honestly, like the people that we bring in the room, not only the firms are amazing, but the GPs are amazing. Like I could go over the list of all the people that follow, and we have some, VCs like 11 Tribes with Mark Phillips. Like he's come to the last 4 of the 5 events. And we love him being in the room, and he finds so much value and deal flow from it as well. And what's interesting, so we have the VC do a pitch to the founders. And what it does is it actually humanizes the VCs, and it creates this dynamic and creates this environment where now the founders know who's in their target zone, who they should be talking with. And also they don't see it as this like super scary, massive VC. It's like, I think coming back to the whole like imposter syndrome, like I'm sure all of them are worried, like, okay, am I talking to the right person? But it creates that humanization where they're open to talking with each other. And then also I'm sure founders talk to great people and the enterprise level companies as well. But really our goal is one, and we're going to go this even deeper on the community side. One, how do we help the founders get VC ready or learn they're not VC ready? And then second thing, how do we actually help them prepare and get funded and maybe even be a part of their journey long term, if we invest in them or add value to them, et cetera. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic, and it's been amazing to see the people we bring in the room and, what happens after the room, from checks being written to, companies that are like, hey, you're not ready yet, but like keep in touch with me over the next 6 months. And then, you never know where that can lead.
Funds usually have a thesis as well, right? So there needs to be a bit of a fit. Does the style that you guys have, like when the VC's up there, are they making it very clear their thesis that will allow for almost like weeding out? Because I would imagine also like 100 to 150 founders and there's a handful of investors, like trying to make sure that the best connections get made. Is that part of what your goal is?
Yeah, that's one of the goals. And we go past the events too. Like we can connect with them outside of it. Again, we're building the community side where we're actually going to create a flow of helping them connect with the VCs, even if the VC wasn't at the event, but they're part of our community. But yeah, the investors are very clear on what their thesis is. Some do better than others, but they're really clear on what is the type of founder they're looking for, what is the type of company they're looking for. Some VCs invest in 100 plus companies a year. Some VCs invest in 6 companies a year, right? And so it's a really interesting dynamic of every single different VC, but usually it allows the founder to say, okay, these are the 2 VCs I should be talking with. And again, just like any networking event, you're not going to be able to have that full conversation at the event. But going back to the whole chessboard, what can you, like, I always see it as like the first step is like, okay, getting into the room. The second step is who do you want to talk to? And the goal in those first 2 minutes, 3 minutes, even 30 seconds, how do I talk about or say something or have the conversation that will lead to an email and then lead to, a 30-minute conversation? And I think a lot of founders need to think about that as like, think of it as a chessboard. And it's like the next step is how do I differentiate myself, be unique enough, fit that VC to continue the conversation later on. And I think that could be in our events or any type of networking is so important to continue that conversation, continue down that path. And sometimes they're just not the right fit, so don't force it, right? And sometimes you realize, hey, I'm not ready yet. Okay, great. Go back to the drawing board, get some traction. Sometimes it's not go raise money. It's like go get some customers, go get revenue.
I love that. I think that what you're building is so exciting. And so if people are listening to this and they're like, oh my goodness, like this ecosystem is something I need to be part of, what's the best way for them to find you and to get involved with founders and funders?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, connect with me on LinkedIn, look up Adam Shaw, Founders and Funders, or Adam Shaw. I think it's -FNF. Go to our website, founders, the letter N, founders.com. We're going to be really rolling out our community side of going a lot deeper into adding value outside of the event. So, follow our journey and keep connecting. And I mean, one thing we're going to be doing too is like share your deck with us, send an overview, because if you're a fit for the VCs that are on our community, like we will connect you, and we're not going to do it at any cost. We don't charge the VC anything. We don't choose the founder anything. And so, we're looking to really add value and trying to connect awesome founders, and you never know, maybe we'll personally invest in you as well. So yeah, connect with me, and I'd love to chat with anybody and come to our events. Go look up Luma. We're doing 28 events next year. Any city you're in, probably you can get to. We're doing LA and San Francisco in January. We'll be in Salt Lake City and New York in February. We'll be in South by Southwest, Austin, and then back to New York. So, connect with us and come to our event. And I'd love to meet anybody.
So cool. We'll make sure to put all those links in the show notes so it's super easy for people to find you and connect with you as well as the organization. I want to thank you so much for your time, Adam. I feel like we could go for hours, but we'll have you back for sure. Before we wrap up, we have a few rapid fire questions. You can answer in a word, a sentence. You can always pass. You ready?
Cool. Yeah, let's do it.
Amazing. What's one decision that changed everything for you as a leader?
I think not just a leader, but just changed everything in my life is marrying my wife for sure. I mean, she's helped me be a better leader and helped me in every single way. So yeah.
Amazing. What does strategy feel like when you're doing it well?
Feels like productiveness, which is really hard. Like everyone says like, oh, I'm so busy. It's like my whole goal is like, how do I say like I'm super productive? But honestly, I think what it feels like is you don't feel like you're juggling 1,000 different things. You feel like you're starting to get that harmony where you can delegate and you can rely on other people. And it feels like scale, honestly, where you can really start scaling your company.
Love it. Is there a book, podcast, or person that really cracked something open for you?
I mean, I touched on him a lot during the podcast. Eddie Wilson, go listen to his Impact by Eddie Wilson podcast. I've learned a lot from him, from systems, processes, personal life, many different things. And yeah, I'm really grateful for his mentorship.
Excellent. What's something you said never again to in your business?
Not knowing my financials. Rockefeller says if you don't know your finances, then your business is dead. And I 100% agree with that. I'm not great at math, but I've forced myself to learn finances and I've forced myself to be good at business math, because even if you're not the CFO, you should know your numbers, and it's so crucial.
So much I want to say, but another next podcast. If you had a free weekend and zero obligations, how would you spend it?
If we had time, traveling to another country or place with my wife, and like we talked about, like learning about the culture, trying new foods, just enjoying life and seeing new cities. Probably, honestly, right now would be flying to Dublin and just seeing like the beautiful scenery with my wife. Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
I know, it's high on our bucket list.
Baby moon?
Yeah, maybe.
Adam, thank you so much for your generosity with your time, your insights, your experiences. We went deep, but I also feel like we barely scratched the surface. So thank you so much for being with me here on Builders.
Yeah, thank you for letting me share my journey, and thank you for the impact you're making on so many entrepreneurs. Like I know the people that come on as clients for you or just listen to you, I know they receive a lot of value. So really grateful for you and our friendship.
Same. Thank you so much. That's a wrap for this episode of Builders, where we get real about what it actually takes to grow companies that perform without grinding you into the ground. If today's convo sparks something for you, here's what to do next. Follow the show, drop a 5-star review, and share it with someone else who's building big. Don't let it be lonely at the top. If you're ready for more clarity, more leadership freedom, and less of a duct tape and go growth vibe, let's connect. Book your free business breakdown call using the link in the show notes. In 30 minutes, I'll help you pinpoint where blockers in your time, team, or strategy are silently stalling your growth. Walk away with a personalized fix-it list that gives you the clarity you've been craving on what to shift now to regain traction and build momentum. For more tools, insights, and my no-fluff takes on leadership and scaling strategically, join the Builders Club, also linked in the show notes. You can also head over to leaderswhobuild.com, where you'll find all the links to peep my creds, see client wins, or just confirm that yes, I went to the gym today. Until next time, keep leading boldly, building smart, and living success on your terms.